The sound of metal crashing against concrete echoed through the empty mess hall at 2200 hours. Helen Carter collapsed onto the cold floor, her frail body hitting hard as food scattered everywhere. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead. Pathetic! Jake Morrison towered over her, all 6 feet of Marine muscle radiating contempt. Marines are trying to eat and you're making a mess, useless old hag. 5 other Marines burst into laughter. Derek Chen pulled out his phone, recording everything. Maria Santos, the self-proclaimed Queen Bee of Camp Pendleton, kicked Helen's ribs lightly with her boot. Maybe it's time to retire, Grandma. This mess hall doesn't need trash like you. Helen slowly pushed herself up from the floor. At 58 years old, her shoulders seemed too thin, her gray hair too brittle. Blood still dripped from her forehead, but she didn't wipe it away. Instead, she looked at Jake with peculiar gray eyes that seemed to calculate something beyond the moment. Her right hand trembled slightly, but not from fear. 5 fingers twitched in an odd rhythm, as if counting beats in a song only she could hear. 2203 hours, Helen whispered, her gaze drifting to the window. Wind speed 12 knots, 3 exits, 6 targets, optimal breach in 17 minutes. What did you just say? Jake frowned, stepping closer. Helen shook her head, bending down to pick up the scattered tray. Sorry, dear. Old people say strange things sometimes. The fluorescent lights above flickered once, twice. Then complete darkness swallowed the mess hall. In that absolute blackness, a voice emerged, not Helen's. A man's voice, heavy with Eastern European accent. Good evening, Phantom 6. I've been waiting 28 years for this moment. The darkness seemed to pulse with sudden tension. Jake fumbled for his phone, the small LED light casting wild shadows. Helen's hand shot out, pushing it down with surprising force. Don't, she said, and for the first time, her voice carried no tremor at all. 7 Marines and 1 old cleaning lady, the accented voice continued, echoing from somewhere in the darkness. Perfect odds, wouldn't you say? Jake tried to take charge, shouting orders to his fellow Marines, but panic had already set in. Derek Chen frantically tried his radio, dead. His phone showed no signal. Maria Santos screamed as footsteps echoed closer, the sound bouncing off walls in ways that made distance impossible to judge. But Helen wasn't panicking. In the pitch darkness, she moved with fluid precision, not bumping into a single table or chair. Her breathing remained steady, controlled. She began counting under her breath, but not in English. The words were soft, methodical, in what sounded like Russian. Boot patterns, she whispered. Size 11. Weight distribution suggests tactical gear. Spacing indicates Spetsnaz training. Her head tilted slightly. 3 operators, primary at north entrance, secondary moving through kitchen, third maintaining overwatch position. How can you possibly know that? Jake's voice cracked with fear. Helen didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed Jake's shoulder and guided him with unexpected strength toward the southwest corner. Structural pillar here. Stay low. Don't move. The voice laughed, a cold sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Hiding won't help, Phantom. I know every corner of this place. 3 months of preparation, every camera angle memorized, every patrol route calculated, even scheduled your precious janitor shifts. Something shifted in Helen's posture. 3 months. She'd noticed the unusual maintenance crew 3 months ago, the ones who worked only at night, who avoided eye contact, who moved with too much precision for civilian contractors. The main doors burst open. Colonel Richards entered with 2 MPs, flashlights sweeping. What's going on here? Why are the lights? The takedown was swift, professional. Richards hit the ground hard, unconscious before he could finish his sentence. The MPs followed seconds later. Helen moved in the darkness, tearing strips from the hem of her janitor uniform with practiced efficiency. She knelt beside Richards, her hands finding his pulse in the dark, applying pressure to points that would slow bleeding from where his head had struck the floor. How do you know medical procedures? Jake whispered. Lucky guess, Helen replied, but her hands moved with the muscle memory of someone who had done this hundreds of times before. The sound of breach charges being placed on doors echoed through the hall. Small metallic clicks that Helen identified immediately. Semtex, Eastern Bloc variety. 4.3-second delay once triggered. If this injustice makes your blood boil, if you believe those who serve in shadows deserve recognition, hit that like button and subscribe. Don't forget to tap the thanks button below to support more incredible true stories of hidden heroes. Outside, Captain Torres arrived with a full squad, but the doors wouldn't budge. They had been sealed from inside with industrial-grade magnetic locks. Through the reinforced windows, Torres could see only darkness and the occasional sweep of a tactical flashlight. "Get me a breaching team," Torres barked into his radio, "and someone find out why the backup power isn't kicking in." Inside, Helen guided the 7 Marines through the darkness with uncanny precision. Her hand found the electrical panel on the wall from pure memory, fingers tracing circuits she shouldn't know existed. "Kitchen freight elevator," she whispered. "Old model. Still runs on analog backup power. Kozlov wouldn't have thought to disable it." "Kozlov?" Jake asked. "You know who this is?" Helen didn't answer. She was already moving, leading them through the darkness. Jake stumbled over a chair. Helen's arm shot out, catching him with one hand. The grip was surprisingly strong, steady. Maria Santos whimpered as they moved, but Helen's presence seemed to calm her, a strange authority radiating from the old woman even in pitch darkness. "Running to the kitchen?" Kozlov's voice taunted. "I disabled that exit first, Phantom. Just like I disabled the loading dock. And the emergency exits. No one gets in, no one gets out. Not until our business is concluded." In the darkness, Helen smiled. It was an expression no one could see, but somehow everyone felt it. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees. "I'm not running, Victor," she said, her voice carrying across the hall with perfect acoustic calculation. "I'm hunting." The silence that followed was profound. Kozlov had stopped talking, stopped moving. For the first time since the lights went out, uncertainty crept into the equation. Helen tapped something against a water pipe. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Then a complex pattern that Jake recognized as Morse code but couldn't decipher. Throughout the base, in a secure monitoring station, a young intelligence officer's eyes widened as the message came through. Ghost protocol active, authentication, Amber Star, 3 hostile operators, priority Alpha. The intelligence officer's hands shook as he picked up a red phone that hadn't been used in 15 years. "Sir, we have a Ghost protocol activation. Authentication checks out. Sir, it's Phantom 6. Back in the mess hall, Derek Chen whispered urgently, "That's impossible. How can you know where they are? We can't see anything." Helen's response was to remove her janitor cap. In the darkness, the sound of fabric tearing was followed by the soft thud of something hitting the floor. When Jake's phone light flickered on for just a second, he caught a glimpse of gray hair on the ground, a wig. Underneath, Helen's real hair was shorter, darker, pulled back in a severe style that spoke of military precision. "2 coming from the left," Helen said calmly. "1 from the right. The left pair will use flashbangs. Cover your ears and close your eyes in 3, 2, 1. The explosion of light and sound was overwhelming, but Helen had already positioned everyone behind cover, their faces turned away, ears protected. In that brief moment of illumination, they saw her clearly for the first time. The elderly stoop was gone. The trembling hands were steady. The frail grandmother had been replaced by something else entirely. She moved like liquid shadow. A mop handle in her hand snapped in half with a precise strike against the wall edge, creating 2 perfectly weighted batons. The first operator entered, night vision goggles glowing green in the darkness. Helen struck with surgical precision, not at his head or body where armor protected, but at specific nerve clusters in his exposed wrists and neck. The operator dropped silently. "You starting to notice something unusual about Helen? Something that doesn't quite add up? Comment below if you're catching the clues." Maria Santos felt the operator's weapon, reaching for it instinctively. Helen's hand stopped her immediately. "Don't. The safety's been welded. It's a trap weapon. Touch the trigger and the magazine explodes." "How could you possibly know that?" Maria gasped. Helen didn't answer. She was already moving, dragging the unconscious operator into a supply closet with strength that shouldn't exist in her seemingly aged frame. The second operator tried to flank them, but Helen had anticipated it. She'd positioned everyone specifically to funnel the attacker into a narrow corridor between tables. When he appeared, she was already there, having moved silently around the entire group. The encounter lasted less than 2 seconds. The operator went down with a confused expression, his nervous system temporarily shut down by strikes to pressure points that few people in the world knew existed. Outside, Sergeant Mills had arrived with reinforcements. He was a 20-year veteran who'd served in Bosnia, Afghanistan, and Iraq. As he watched through the window, observing the tactical movements illuminated by sporadic flashlight beams, something nagged at his memory. "That movement pattern," he muttered to Captain Torres. I've seen it before. Bosnia, 95. There were rumors about a ghost unit, night reconnaissance specialists who could operate in complete darkness. They said the unit commander was... But no, that's impossible. What's impossible? Torres demanded. Phantom 6, but that whole unit died in Operation Amber Star. All 6 operators. The military confirmed it. Inside, Kozlov's frustration was growing audible. Enough games. You think you can protect them all, Phantom? You're older now, slower. And you're alone. Helen guided the Marines to the kitchen, her hand trailing along the wall, reading the building like Braille. She stopped suddenly, sniffing the air. Gas leak. He's ruptured the main line. 4 minutes until the concentration reaches combustible levels. He's trying to blow us up? Jake's voice pitched higher with panic. No. He's creating a secondary threat to force us into the open. Standard Spetsnaz tactic. Page 47 of their Urban Warfare Manual, if memory serves. Derek Chen stared at her in the darkness. Who are you? Right now, I'm the person keeping you alive. Follow me. The walk-in freezer is reinforced and airtight. We can wait out the gas there. Why should we trust you? Jake demanded, his earlier arrogance replaced with desperate confusion. Helen's voice was soft, but carried absolute certainty. Because, young man, you're still breathing. If I wanted you dead, you would have been dead 17 minutes ago. Security footage from the previous week was being reviewed frantically in the base's command center. There was Helen, meeting with a man outside the mess hall. The image was grainy, but the man appeared to be passing her something. Money? Documents? Sir, a technician called out, we've got a problem. Helen Carter, she died in 2010. Car accident in Phoenix. Whoever this is, she's using a stolen identity. Kozlov's voice echoed through the mess hall again, triumphant. They're starting to figure it out, aren't they, Phantom? Your handler sold you out, told us exactly where to find you. How much did Moscow pay you to disappear all those years ago? How much to betray your country? Helen's smartwatch, a tactical model with night vision capabilities and military-grade heart rate monitoring that could run for 7 days on a single charge, glowed softly in the darkness. She checked it once, then continued moving. 40 degrees left, 8 meters forward, she instructed the group. Mind the overturned table at your 2 o'clock? They moved through the darkness like a strange parade, Helen leading with absolute confidence while 7 Marines stumbled behind her, entirely dependent on her guidance. The third operator had been waiting, patient, professional. He'd studied the layout, knew they'd have to pass through this choke point. But Helen knew too. She'd felt the air displacement from his breathing, heard the subtle shift of weight on the floorboards that indicated someone maintaining a firing position for extended periods. The kitchen knife left her hand in a fluid motion, sailing through the darkness with impossible precision. It struck exactly where she intended, pinning the operator's sleeve to the wooden door frame, immobilizing his trigger hand without causing serious injury. Warning shot, she said simply. The next one won't miss. The walk-in freezer door opened with a pneumatic hiss. Helen ushered everyone inside, then paused at the threshold. Thermal differential will hide our heat signatures for approximately 6 minutes. After that, his infrared will pick us up. Then what? Maria asked, her earlier cruelty replaced with raw fear. Then we stop hiding and start hunting. Jake watched her in the dim emergency lighting of the freezer. The way she stood, the way she moved, everything had changed. The grandmother facade had completely fallen away. You're not really a janitor, are you? Helen turned to him, and in the cold light, he could see her eyes clearly for the first time. They were the eyes of someone who had seen too much, done too much, lost too much. I've been a janitor for 15 years, Mr. Morrison. Before that, I was something else. A Morrison, she repeated his name slowly. Your grandmother's maiden name was Morrison, wasn't it? Sarah Morrison from Oklahoma? Jake nodded, confused. How did you know that? Your grandfather, Staff Sergeant Timothy Morrison, served with distinction in the 75th Rangers before transferring to a classified unit in '93. Helen's voice grew distant. He was a good man, the best spotter I ever worked with. You knew my grandfather? Knew him? Helen's laugh was bitter. He saved my life 4 times in Bosnia. I managed to return the favor twice. We called it even. The freezer door suddenly buckled as something heavy slammed against it from outside. Kozlov's voice was closer now, more personal. You killed 12 of my men in Bosnia, Phantom. Good men. Patriots who believed in something greater. Patriots? Helen's voice turned to ice. They were trafficking children, Victor, 7 to 12 years old, sold to the highest bidder. Your patriots were monsters. They were soldiers following orders. They were predators, and I put them down like the rabid dogs they were. Outside the freezer, the gas concentration was rising. Through the small window, Helen could see Kozlov himself now. Viktor Kozlov, former Spetsnaz, current mercenary, and the ghost from her past she'd hoped never to face again. He was older too, scarred, but still lethal. "Tell me, Phantom," Kozlov called out. "Do they know about the massacre? Do they know what you did to that village?" Helen's jaw tightened. That wasn't a village. It was a processing center. 43 traffickers. 0 civilians? The records say otherwise. The records were altered by people who profited from the trade. People in both our governments who needed the truth buried along with my team. Derek Chen was typing frantically on his phone, which had suddenly regained signal. "I'm finding something. Classified files are being accessed remotely. Someone with Pentagon clearance is pulling everything about Operation Amber Star." On his screen, fragments of documents appeared. Photos from 1995, 6 operators in night combat gear, faces obscured by tactical masks. But one figure stood out, smaller, slighter, but positioned at the center, the team leader. The images were labeled Ghost Team 6, Operation Amber Star, status KIA. "Killed in action," Derek read. All 6 operators confirmed dead, bodies recovered and identified. He looked up at Helen. "But you're here." 5 bodies were recovered, Helen corrected. 5 members of my team. The 6th body they claim was mine belonged to one of the traffickers. Similar height, build. The DNA test was faked by someone very high up who wanted me to disappear. Why? Because I knew too much. Because I'd refused certain orders. Because dead heroes can't testify before congressional committees. The gas leak had been contained by emergency systems, but Kozlov wasn't finished. Through the freezer window, they could see him setting up something new. Helen recognized it immediately. A portable thermal lance, military grade, could cut through the freezer door in minutes. "We need to move," she said. "Now." "Move where?" Jake demanded. "He's got us trapped." Helen looked at him steadily. "Your grandfather once asked me the same question. We were pinned down by 32 hostiles in a bombed-out school in Sarajevo. No backup, no extraction, no hope. What did you do?" I told him the truth. When you can't run and you can't hide, there's only one option left. She paused, checking her watch again. "You become the nightmare they whisper about in the dark." She moved to the back of the freezer, running her hands along the wall until she found what she was looking for. A maintenance panel, painted over, forgotten. Inside was the freezer's original ventilation system, from before the renovation 5 years ago. The ductwork was narrow, cramped, but possible. "This leads to the loading dock," she said. "It's a straight crawl 30 meters. At the end, there's a drop into the storage room. 2 meters, controlled fall. You want us to crawl through there?" Maria looked horrified. "I want you to survive. This is how you survive." One by one, she helped them into the vent, giving each precise instructions on navigation. Jake was the last to go. As he climbed in, he turned back. "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you," Helen lied smoothly. Jake hesitated. "That's not true, is it?" Helen smiled, and for a moment, she looked like a grandmother again. "Your grandfather was smarter than you. He would have already been halfway through that vent by now. He would have stayed to help you. No, he would have followed orders. Because he understood that sometimes one person has to hold the line so others can live. Go, now. That's an order, Marine." Jake crawled into the vent, and Helen sealed it behind him. Then she turned to face the freezer door, just as the thermal lance burst through. The metal glowed orange, then white, then began to part like curtains. Through the growing gap, she could see Kozlov's face, scarred and older, but still carrying the same cruel intelligence she remembered. "Alone at last, Phantom," he said in Russian. "Not quite," Helen replied in the same language. "You forgot about the ghosts." "Ghosts? The ones who have been watching you for the last 3 months. Did you really think you were the only one planning this reunion?" Doubt flickered across Kozlov's face. Helen used that moment of uncertainty. The freezer had one feature Kozlov hadn't considered: emergency CO2 fire suppression. She triggered it manually, flooding the area with dense white gas that obscured everything. In that chaos, she moved. Mills, watching from outside, saw it happen through the window. One moment, there was only white gas and confusion. The next, Kozlov was on the ground, Helen standing over him, his own weapon in her hands. "Pentagon's on the line!" Torres shouted. "They're asking about Phantom 6. They want confirmation of identity." "Tell them," Mills started, then stopped. Through the window, in a brief clearing of the gas, he saw Helen's torn shirt. Saw what was underneath. "Mother of God, tell them confirmed. Phantom 6 is alive." The tattoo was elaborate, beautiful, and terrible. It covered most of her left shoulder and upper back. Ghost Recon, in Gothic letters, curved above a detailed skull, wearing a special operations beret. Below it, Operation Amber Star, and coordinates, 44.8176 degrees north, 15.8678 degrees east. The exact location in Bosnia where 5 members of Ghost Team 6 had died. 3 Purple Hearts were etched into the design, along with a silver star and a Distinguished Service Cross. But it was the number that made Mills' blood run cold. A simple 6 incorporated into the skull's design. Not 6th member, not Team 6, she was 6, the legendary commander of the most elite night operations unit in U.S. military history. Jake and the others had made it through the vent and were stumbling out of the storage room when they heard the commotion. Emergency lights were flickering back on throughout the base. The backup power had finally been restored, probably by Helen's Ghost Protocol activation. They ran back toward the mess hall, arriving just as the doors were being forced open by base security. Inside, they could see Helen standing calmly in the center of the chaos. Kozlov was on his knees, hands zip-tied behind his back. His 2 conscious operators were similarly restrained. The third was still unconscious, but breathing steadily. Colonel Richards was sitting up, holding his head but alert. He took one look at Helen, saw the tattoo through her torn shirt, and struggled to his feet. Even injured, even confused, military protocol took over. He snapped to attention and saluted. "Colonel Richards, Camp Pendleton Security," he said formally. "It's an honor, ma'am, an absolute honor." Helen didn't return the salute. She couldn't. She wasn't in uniform. She wasn't officially military anymore. But she nodded with the gravity of someone who understood the weight of the gesture. "The honor was mine, Colonel. 15 years ago, I swore I was done with this life. But some oaths run deeper than retirement." Jake pushed through the crowd of Marines that was forming. His face was streaked with tears. "Ma'am, what I did earlier, I didn't know. I'm so sorry." Helen looked at him with those gray eyes that had seen too much. "You couldn't have known. I made sure of that. I've been Helen Carter, janitor, for 15 years. Before that, I was Lieutenant Colonel Helen Morrison, commander of Ghost Team 6. And before that," she paused. "Before that, I was just a young woman who believed she could make a difference in the dark places of the world." "Morrison?" Jake's voice cracked. You have the same name as my grandfather?" "No, son. Your grandfather took his wife's name when they married. Said Morrison was a name worth carrying forward. He was honoring his promise to me, to make sure the Morrison name lived on after I was supposedly dead." Maria Santos stood frozen, her earlier cruelty transformed into awe. The stories about women in special operations, they started with you. You were the first. Not the first, Helen corrected. Just the first they couldn't classify out of existence. My team's work in Bosnia saved 300 children from trafficking rings. The military wanted to bury it because it implicated several high-ranking officials in the trade. They gave me a choice: die a hero or live as nobody. So you chose to disappear? I chose to survive, and to keep my promise to 5 good soldiers who didn't make it home. I told their families I'd live for all 6 of us. Derek Chen was still on his phone, pulling up more declassified documents. This is incredible. You have the highest confirmed kill count in night operations history. 73 confirmed in Bosnia alone. Helen's expression darkened. Every one of them was trying to hurt children. I don't celebrate those numbers, Mr. Chen. I carry them. Captain Torres stepped forward. Ma'am, I need to ask, is the threat contained? Helen looked at Kozlov, who was glaring at her with undimmed hatred. This threat is, but Victor here was just the first wave. He mentioned Moscow paid someone. There's a larger operation in play. Hydra, Kozlov spat suddenly. You think you've won, Phantom? Hydra has 47 assets embedded in military bases across the country. This was just to confirm you were alive, to draw you out. Then you failed, Helen said simply. I'm not the same operative I was 28 years ago. I'm just an old woman who cleans floors. Kozlov laughed bitterly. You just took down 3 Spetsnaz-trained operators in complete darkness. I got lucky. Lucky? Mills had entered the mess hall now, his eyes wide with recognition and respect. Ma'am, what you did tonight, that wasn't luck. That was ghost team training, the acoustic targeting, the pressure point strikes, the predictive movement patterns. I studied your tactics in intelligence school. More Marines were flooding in now. Word had spread across the base faster than wildfire. Phantom 6 was alive. The legend was real, and she'd been cleaning their mess hall for 15 years. Helen looked uncomfortable with the attention. She moved toward the door, but stopped when she heard the distinctive sound of helicopters approaching. Not just any helicopters, the twin rotor beat of CH-47 Chinooks, military transport, flying in formation. Torres's radio crackled to life. Captain, this is Tower. We have 4 inbound helicopters requesting immediate landing. Authorization code is... The controller paused, his voice shaking. Sir, it's a Joint Chiefs authorization. 4 stars. 4 of them. Through the mess hall windows, everyone watched as the helicopters descended onto the parade ground. Even at a distance, the stars on the aircraft were visible. These weren't just any generals. These were the highest-ranking officers in their respective branches. Helen closed her eyes. They said if Ghost Protocol was ever activated, they'd come. I didn't think they'd remember after all these years. General Robert Anderson, Army Chief of Staff. General Patricia Thompson, Marine Corps Commandant. Admiral James Hayes, Chief of Naval Operations. General Michael Mitchell, Air Force Chief of Staff. They walked in formation across the parade ground, their aides struggling to keep pace. Every Marine on the base had stopped what they were doing to watch. Jake looked at Helen in amazement. 4 service chiefs? For one person? Helen's voice was quiet. Ghost Team 6 didn't officially exist, but we ran operations for all branches. We were the solution when conventional forces couldn't operate, when the mission was too dark, too dangerous, or too politically sensitive for acknowledged units. The generals entered the mess hall. The room fell silent. Every Marine snapped to attention. The generals moved past them all, heading straight for Helen. She stood still, not at attention. She wasn't military anymore, but with a bearing that commanded respect nonetheless. General Anderson spoke first. Hello, 6. General, we thought you were dead. That was the idea, sir. Why activate the protocol now, after 15 years? Helen gestured to Kozlov. He found me, which means others can too. And he mentioned Hydra. If that network is real, if there are truly 47 embedded assets, then the country needs to know. General Thompson stepped forward. She was the first female Marine Corps Commandant, and her eyes held a mixture of respect and something deeper. You could have stayed hidden, could have let him complete his mission. He would have killed 7 Marines and stolen classified defense specifications, ma'am. Hiding stopped being an option the moment he entered this base. Admiral Hayes cleared his throat. The President has been briefed. He's authorized full reinstatement if you want it. Your previous rank, back pay for 15 years, full honors. Helen shook her head. I'm done with killing, Admiral. I've been done since Bosnia. Then what do you want? General Mitchell asked. Helen looked at Jake, at Maria, at Derek, at all the young Marines who had witnessed something extraordinary tonight. These kids need training, real training, not just how to fight in daylight with million-dollar equipment, but how to operate when everything goes dark. When technology fails, when they're outnumbered and outgunned. You want to teach? I want to make sure that the next time someone like Kozlov comes calling, there's more than one old janitor who can stop them. The generals exchanged glances. Anderson nodded slowly. The Ghost Protocol Academy. We've had the plans drawn up for 20 years, waiting for the right person to run it. I have conditions, Helen said. Name them. First, it's open to all branches. Second, women get equal consideration for selection. Third, we focus on protective operations, saving lives, not taking them. Fourth, she looked at Jake, I get to choose my first candidates. Jake's eyes widened. After everything he'd done, after the way he'd treated her, she was choosing him? Helen saw his confusion. Your grandfather would never forgive me if I didn't give you the chance to be better than you were tonight. Besides, she smiled slightly, you have his eyes. He could see in complete darkness too, once I taught him how. General Anderson extended his hand. Welcome back, Colonel Morrison. Helen looked at his hand for a long moment, then shook it. It's still Carter. Helen Carter. The colonel died in Bosnia with her team. The janitor survived to teach their lessons. Then welcome back, Ms. Carter. Maria Santos stepped forward tentatively. Ma'am, would you consider me for the academy? Helen studied her. The young woman who had kicked her while she was down, who had called her trash. Why? Because tonight I learned that real strength isn't about size or intimidation. It's about protecting others even when they don't deserve it. You protected us after her voice broke, after we were horrible to you. Everyone deserves a second chance, Santos, even bullies who kick old women. Derek Chen raised his hand. I want in too. I want to learn how you did what you did. The acoustic targeting, the movement prediction. It's like you turned darkness into an advantage. Helen nodded slowly. Darkness is only frightening if you don't understand it. Once you learn its language, it becomes your greatest ally. Kozlov suddenly spoke up, his voice bitter. You're making a mistake. Hydra won't stop. They know you're alive now. They'll come for you, for all of you. Helen walked over to him, knelt down so they were eye level. Let them come. I've been hiding for 15 years, Victor. I'm tired of hiding. She leaned closer, speaking in Russian. Tell your handlers that Phantom 6 is dead, but Helen Carter is very much alive, and she's going to train an entire generation of ghosts. Kozlov's face paled. You're going to create an army of operators like yourself? No, I'm going to create something better. Protectors who operate in darkness but serve the light. She stood, switching back to English. Your war is over, Victor. You lost the moment you walked into my mess hall. The generals were already making plans, speaking rapidly into secure phones. The academy would be fast-tracked. Resources would be allocated. But Helen wasn't listening. She was looking around the mess hall, her mess hall, where she'd spent 15 years in humble service, maintaining her cover, keeping her skills sharp by observing everyone who came through. Jake approached hesitantly. Ms. Carter, Helen, I need to tell you something. Speak freely, Morrison. My grandfather, before he died, he used to tell me stories about a warrior who moved like smoke, who could fight in complete darkness, who saved his life in Bosnia. Jake's voice trembled. He said she was the bravest person he ever knew, but he also said she was the saddest, because she carried the weight of everyone she couldn't save. Helen's composure finally cracked slightly. A single tear ran down her cheek. Tim always saw too much. He left me something. Told me to give it to her if I ever found her. I thought he was talking about a myth, a legend. I never imagined. Jake pulled out a small wooden box from his pocket. He carried this for 20 years. Said it belonged to someone who sacrificed everything for others. Helen opened the box with trembling fingers. Inside was a challenge coin, worn smooth by years of handling. On one side, the Ghost Team 6 insignia. On the other, 6 names, the 5 who died, and hers. He had this made after the memorial service, Jake explained. Said the 6th ghost was still out there, still watching over people, still protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Helen held the coin tightly, her eyes closing as memories flooded back. Your grandfather was more than my spotter, Jake. He was my conscience. When the darkness got too deep, when I couldn't see the difference between justice and vengeance anymore, he pulled me back. He said you saved 300 children in Bosnia. 317, Helen corrected, but I couldn't save my team. They died because I made a choice. Save the children or save my people. I chose the children, and I've lived with that choice for 28 years. General Thompson stepped forward. You made the right choice, Helen. Those children are adults now. Many of them have families of their own. You gave them lives your team would have been proud to sacrifice for. I know, Helen said quietly, but knowing and feeling are different things. The base was fully alert now. Marines were gathering outside the mess hall, trying to catch a glimpse of the living legend. Someone started a slow clap, then another. Soon, the entire base was applauding. Not the dramatic celebration of a sports victory, but the deep, respectful acknowledgement of service beyond measure. Helen looked uncomfortable with the attention. She turned to the generals. If we're doing this academy, I have one more condition. Name it, Anderson said. No publicity, no media, no glory. Ghosts don't seek spotlights. Agreed. Helen nodded, then looked around the mess hall one more time. I'll need to train my replacement. This place won't clean itself. Ma'am, Colonel Richards spoke up, still holding his head from the earlier takedown. I think we can manage professional cleaning staff. Professional cleaning staff don't notice when someone's been casing the base for 3 months, Helen pointed out. Sometimes the best security is the person everyone ignores. She walked toward the door, then paused. The 7 Marines who were here tonight, Morrison, Santos, Chen, and the others. They're my first selection for the academy. They've already had their first lesson. Which was? General Mitchell asked. Never judge a book by its cover, and always be kind to the cleaning staff. She smiled slightly. You never know when your life might depend on it. As Helen walked out into the night, the generals following at a respectful distance, Jake called out, Miss Carter! What happens now? She turned back, and for a moment, Jake saw not the old janitor, not the legendary operator, but simply a woman who had found purpose again after years in the shadows. Now, Mr. Morrison, we get to work. Your grandfather used to say that the hardest battles aren't fought with weapons, but with wisdom. The academy opens in 2 weeks. Don't be late. Yes, ma'am. Helen walked across the parade ground, her stride different now. Not the shuffle of an old janitor, but not quite the predatory grace of an elite operator either. It was something in between. The walk of someone who had found balance between who they were and who they had to be. Behind her, Kozlov was being loaded into a secure transport. He would be interrogated, his Hydra network exposed and dismantled. The 47 embedded assets he had mentioned would be identified and neutralized, but that was work for others now. Helen had a different mission. General Anderson walked beside her. You know this changes everything. Ghost Protocol Academy will revolutionize how we train special operators. It's not about creating super soldiers, General. It's about teaching them that the most powerful weapon isn't technology or strength. It's understanding. Understanding terrain, understanding enemies, but most importantly, understanding themselves. And you think these 7 Marines have what it takes? Helen glanced back at the mess hall where Jake and the others stood watching. They faced their fear tonight. They saw their assumptions shattered. They learned humility. That's more than most operators learn in years of training. Even the ones who bullied you? Especially them. They've learned the hardest lesson of all, that strength without honor is just violence, and violence without purpose is just cruelty. A secure phone rang. Anderson answered, listened, then handed it to Helen. It's for you. Helen took the phone reluctantly. Yes? Ms. Carter? The voice was familiar, but older, more mature. This is Anna Volkov. You might not remember me, but... Little Anna? Helen's voice softened. From Sarajevo? Not so little anymore. I'm 37 now, married with 3 children of my own. The woman's voice broke slightly. I saw the news bulletin. They said Phantom 6 was alive. I had to call, had to thank you. You saved my life when I was 9 years old. You carried me out of that trafficking center yourself. Helen's eyes closed, memories flooding back. Anna with the red ribbons in her hair. You remembered. I remember all 317. There was silence on the line, then Anna spoke again. My daughter is 17 now. She wants to be a Marine. I've been terrified, thinking about her in danger. But knowing you're training the next generation, I'm not afraid anymore. What's her name? Helena. I named her after you. Helen had to take a moment to compose herself. Send me her information. If she's anything like her mother, she'll make an excellent ghost. After ending the call, Helen handed the phone back to Anderson. They had reached a nondescript building at the edge of the base. She looked at it with surprise. This is your quarters for tonight, Anderson said. Tomorrow we'll discuss the academy details, but tonight you should rest. You've carried this burden alone for too long. Helen looked at the building, then back at the mess hall in the distance. I should clean up. The morning shift will need... Helen, Thompson interrupted gently. You're not the janitor anymore. No, Helen agreed, but I'm not Phantom 6 either. That person died in Bosnia with her team. She looked at each general in turn. I'm something new now, someone who teaches others to walk in darkness without losing their light. General Hayes nodded slowly. What should we call you then? Helen thought for a moment. Instructor Carter will do, just another teacher at just another training facility. There's nothing just another about what you're building, Mitchell said. That's the point, General. The most dangerous person in any room is the one nobody notices. I'm going to teach them to be invisible in plain sight. to be protectors who never need recognition, to be ghosts who guard the living. As the generals departed, leaving Helen alone outside her temporary quarters, she looked up at the stars. The same stars she'd navigated by in Bosnia when her GPS failed. The same stars her team had seen on their last night alive. "I kept my promise," she whispered to the night. "I lived. And now I'll make sure others learn what we knew, that sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones whose names are never known." Inside the quarters, she found a package waiting on the table. No return address, but she recognized the handwriting. She opened it carefully, revealing a set of dog tags. Not hers. She'd thrown those away years ago. These were new, freshly minted. "Instructor Helen Carter," they read. "Ghost Protocol Academy." And on the back, a simple inscription, "The shadow that guards the light." There was a note. "Welcome back to the fight, but this time, you're not alone. A friend who remembers Bosnia." Helen held the tags for a long moment, then put them on. For 15 years, she'd hidden from her past. Now, she would use it to forge a better future. Her phone, the civilian one she'd carried as a janitor, buzzed with a text. It was from Jake Morrison. "Ms. Carter, I'm reading my grandfather's journal. He wrote about you every day. He said you taught him that courage isn't the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. I want to learn that too." She texted back, "Lesson 1 starts tomorrow, 0500, bring the others." What should we prepare? Nothing. The darkness will teach you everything you need to know. Outside, Camp Pendleton was settling into its nighttime routine. Guards walked their posts, Marines slept in their barracks. And somewhere in a secure detention facility, Viktor Kozlov was beginning to understand that he'd made a catastrophic error. For those interested in learning real protective tactics from former special operations instructors, check out the online Defensive Strategies course. This week only, it's 50% off for those ready to step out of their comfort zone and into confidence. He'd thought he was hunting an old woman. Instead, he'd awakened something far more dangerous, a teacher. And teachers, unlike soldiers, don't just win battles. They create generations of winners. Helen stood by the window, watching the base she'd called home for 15 years. Tomorrow, everything would change. The Ghost Protocol Academy would begin its work. 7 Marines who had started the night as bullies would begin their transformation into protectors. But tonight, she had one more task. She picked up the secure phone Anderson had left and dialed a number from memory. It rang 3 times before a voice answered in Russian. "This is Control." "This is Phantom 6, Helen said in perfect Russian. "Authentication, Amber Star, priority message for Moscow." There was stunned silence. Then, "Phantom 6 is dead." "Phantom 6 is dead," Helen agreed. "But Helen Carter is very much alive, and she has a message for your Hydra network." "What message?" "Schools in session, class size, unlimited, graduation rate, 100%. Course title, How to Hunt Hydra Operatives in Total Darkness." She paused. "Oh, and Viktor Kozlov? He failed. Spectacularly." She hung up before they could respond. Let them worry. Let them wonder. Let them fear what was coming. The mess hall lights were off now, the space that had been her battlefield just hours ago returning to mundane normality. But Helen knew better. Every mundane space could become a battlefield. Every ordinary person could be extraordinary. Every shadow could hide a protector. Jake Morrison stood outside her quarters, having run all the way from his barracks. "Ms. Carter, I couldn't sleep. I keep thinking about what you said, about darkness being an ally." Helen opened the door. The young Marine who had shoved her, mocked her, humiliated her, now stood with tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry," he said. "Not just for tonight. For every veteran I've dismissed. Every person I've judged by appearance. Every time I chose cruelty over kindness." "Apologies are words, Morrison. Tomorrow, you'll begin making amends through actions. What if I'm not good enough? What if I can't learn what you're teaching?" Helen studied him. So young. So much like his grandfather before Bosnia. "Your grandfather asked me the same question once. Want to know what I told him?" Jake nodded eagerly. "I told him that good enough is the enemy of great, that fear of failure is just another darkness to navigate, and that the only way to honor the fallen is to be better than we were yesterday." Did he become great? He became something better. He became reliable. In pitch darkness, under fire, outnumbered and outgunned, Tim Morrison never failed to watch my 6. That's worth more than greatness. That's worth trust. Jake straightened. I want to earn that. That trust. Then be here at 0500. And Morrison? Yes, ma'am. Bring coffee, black. The real stuff, not that mess hall swamp water. If I'm going to turn you into ghosts, I need proper fuel. Jake actually smiled. Yes, ma'am. 0500. Real coffee. As he ran back to the barracks, Helen allowed herself a small smile, too. The boy had potential. They all did. Even the ones who had been cruel. Maybe especially them. They'd learned humility tonight, and that was the first requirement for wisdom. Her phone rang again. The civilian one. The caller ID showed unknown, but she recognized the breathing pattern before the caller even spoke. 28 years, and she still recognized it. Hello, Dimitri, she said calmly. They say you captured Victor. They say you're starting a school. Both true. You know I have to come for you now. It's nothing personal. I know. Helen's voice held no fear, only resignation. But not tonight. Tonight I'm just a tired old woman who needs sleep. You were never just anything, Phantom. Dimitri paused. How long do I have before your academy is operational? 2 weeks. Then I'll see you in 13 days. Looking forward to it. She hung up and set the phone aside. Dmitry Volkov, Anna's uncle, and the best tracker the Soviet Union ever produced. He'd been hunting her for 3 decades. Now, he finally knew where she was. But Helen wasn't worried about Dmitry. She was thinking about tomorrow, about 7 Marines who would begin their transformation, about the Ghost Academy that would rise from the ashes of her past. She looked at the challenge coin Jake had given her, running her thumb over the worn surface. 6 names, 5 dead, 1 presumed dead. Tomorrow, she would begin creating a new generation of names. Names that would never be known, never be celebrated, but would stand between the darkness and those who couldn't protect themselves. The next morning arrived with typical California Marine fog. 0500 hours exactly. Helen stood in the empty training ground behind the mess hall, a place she'd observed for 15 years but never officially entered. She wore simple black tactical pants and a gray t-shirt. No rank, no insignia, nothing to indicate who or what she was. Jake arrived first, carrying a thermos of coffee that smelled like heaven compared to standard military brew. Behind him came Maria Santos, Derek Chen, and the 4 other Marines who had been in the mess hall. They all looked nervous, uncertain. You came, Helen said simply. We couldn't not come, Maria replied. Not after last night. Helen poured herself coffee, took a sip, and nodded appreciatively. Colombian. Single origin. Your grandfather had good taste too, Morrison. How do we start? Derek asked, his technical mind already trying to categorize and organize what was about to happen. We start with forgetting everything you think you know about combat, Helen said. Line up, arms length apart. They complied immediately. The casual arrogance from last night had been replaced with eager attention. Close your eyes, Helen instructed. Now, tell me what you hear. The ocean, Jake said. What else? Helicopters from the airfield, Maria added. Maybe 3 clicks south. Good. What else? Footsteps, Derek said suddenly. Someone's watching us. Multiple someones. Helen smiled slightly. Open your eyes and turn around. Behind them stood 20 Marines, including Colonel Richards, Captain Torres, and Sergeant Mills. They'd been approaching for the last 2 minutes, trying to observe without being noticed. Lesson 1, Helen said. You're always being watched. The question is whether you know it or not. These Marines wanted to see the legendary Phantom 6 in action, but I'm not here to put on a show. Morrison, Santos, Chen, you're going to demonstrate what you learned last night. We didn't learn anything, Jake protested. We just survived. Survival is the first lesson. You stayed calm when the lights went out. You followed instructions from someone you'd dismissed as worthless hours before. You navigated in complete darkness. That's more than most people accomplish in a lifetime of training. Mills stepped forward. Ma'am, with respect, the base commander wants to know when the official academy starts. It started the moment that these 7 decided to show up, despite their shame and fear, Helen replied. Everything else is just paperwork. Over the next 2 hours, Helen led them through exercises that seemed simple, but were impossibly difficult, standing perfectly still for 20 minutes, walking heel to toe in a straight line with eyes closed, identifying objects by sound alone, counting heartbeats in a crowd. This is ridiculous, one of the watching Marines muttered. This isn't combat training. Helen heard him from 30 feet away. You're right, Corporal Hendricks. It's not combat training. It's survival training. Combat lasts seconds or minutes. Survival lasts a lifetime. Which would you rather master? Hendricks flushed, not having realized she could hear him or know his name. He'd never introduced himself, but Helen had been watching everyone on base for 15 years. She knew them all. By 0700, word had spread across the base. The training ground was surrounded by off-duty Marines, all wanting to witness history. Helen ignored them, focusing on her 7 students. Santos, she called out, you kicked me last night when I was down. Why? Maria's face reddened. Because I could. Because it made me feel powerful. And what did you learn? That real power is choosing not to hurt someone when you can. Wrong, Helen said flatly. Real power is making someone stronger through their pain. That kick taught me you were positioned at my 4 o'clock, weight on your left foot, favoring your right knee, the one you injured in basic training but never reported because you didn't want to seem weak. Maria's eyes widened. How could you possibly know about my knee? You've been compensating for 3 years. I've watched you favor it every time you came through the mess hall. Last night, that knowledge could have let me cripple you permanently with one strike. Instead, I chose to protect you despite your cruelty. That's power. She turned to Jake. You shoved an old woman for being slow. What does that make you? A coward, Jake said immediately. No, it makes you uninformed. You acted on incomplete intelligence. In the field, that gets people killed. Your grandfather never acted without complete intelligence, even if it meant waiting in a sniper hide for 72 hours without moving. 72 hours? Bosnia, January 94, minus 20 degrees. He could have taken the shot after 12 hours, but something felt wrong. So, we waited. 60 hours in, the target's children arrived unexpectedly. If Tim had taken that early shot, 6 kids would have been orphaned. Instead, we waited another 12 hours until the target was alone. Captain Torres interrupted. Ma'am, the generals are here. The 4 service chiefs were indeed walking across the training ground, but Helen didn't stop her lesson. She continued as if they weren't there. Chen, she called out, you recorded my humiliation last night. You thought it was entertainment. What is it now? Derek pulled out his phone, showing the video. Evidence. Evidence of how wrong I was. Evidence of what not to be. Delete it. Ma'am? Delete it. The past is gone. Only lessons remain. Derek deleted the video without hesitation. As he did, Helen noticed something. His hands were perfectly steady. No tremor, no hesitation. The nervous tech specialist was learning control. General Anderson approached. Instructor Carter, we need to discuss resources for the academy. We have everything we need, Helen replied, gesturing into the empty training ground. Space, students, and purpose. You'll need equipment, facilities, support staff. I need darkness, silence, and trust. Everything else is luxury. General Thompson stepped forward. The president wants to meet you. There's talk of a ceremony, public recognition. Then the president misunderstands what we're building here, Helen said calmly. Ghosts don't get ceremonies. They don't get recognition. They get results. The public should know that heroes like you exist. The public should sleep soundly not knowing we exist. That's the whole point. Before the generals could respond, an alarm sounded across the base. Not the standard drill alarm, but the one reserved for actual threats. Colonel Richards's radio crackled to life. Colonel, we have a breach. North perimeter. Single individual. Avoided all sensors until the final fence. Sir, he's asking for Phantom 6 by name. Helen's expression didn't change. Dimitri's early. He said 13 days. You know who this is? Anderson demanded. Dmitry Volkov, former Spetsnaz Alpha Group, the Soviet Union's best tracker. He's been hunting me since 1991. Helen turned to her students. Lesson 2 is about to begin. Should we call security? Torres asked. No, let him come. My students need to see what they're training to become. 10 minutes later, a figure emerged from the morning fog. Dmitry Volkov was 73 years old, but moved like a man half that age, tall, scarred, with eyes that missed nothing. He stopped 20 meters from Helen, hands visible but ready. Hello, little ghost, he said in accented English. Hello, old wolf, Helen replied. You're early. I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd see this academy I'm hearing about. His eyes swept over the 7 Marines. These are your students? Children playing soldier? Jake started to step forward, but Helen's hand stopped him without even looking. They're not playing. They're learning. Learning what? To hide in shadows? To kill from darkness? To protect those who cannot protect themselves. Dmitri laughed, but there was no humor in it. Protection? Is that what you call what happened in Bosnia? 43 men dead in one night? 43 child traffickers eliminated, Helen corrected. Would you prefer I had let them continue? I would prefer you had followed orders and extracted without engaging. Whose orders, Dmitri? The ones that came from officials profiting from the trade, or the ones written on the faces of 317 children waiting to be sold? The two circled each other slowly, not aggressively, but like old predators recognizing territory. The gathered Marines watched in fascination as two legends sized each other up. You know why I'm here, Dmitri said. Hydra sent you? Hydra pays me. There's a difference. Not much of one, Dmitri shrugged. A man must eat. Even old wolves need sustenance. And if I said the Academy could use someone with your skills, I would say you're trying to turn me, little ghost. It won't work. I'm not trying to turn you. I'm offering you what Hydra never could. A chance to matter again, to teach instead of hunt, to build instead of destroy. Pretty words, but we both know how this ends. Yes, Helen agreed. But not today. Today, you're going to help me teach these Marines a lesson about tracking. Dmitri raised an eyebrow. You want me to train your students? I want you to hunt them. 7 Marines, 30 minutes head start, anywhere on base. If even one evades you for 3 hours, you walk away and Hydra never hears from you again. And when I catch them all, then we settle our business. Dmitri considered this. Agreed, but I choose the conditions. Name them. They can use any resources on base except vehicles or outside help. I track old school, no technology, just skill. Helen looked at her 7 students. Their faces showed fear, but also determination. You heard him. 30 minutes head start, beginning now. The 7 Marines scattered immediately, each heading in different directions. Jake went north toward the motor pool. Maria headed for the barracks complex. Derek disappeared into the administrative buildings. The others split up, using what they'd learned about the base over their years of service. Dmitri watched them go with professional interest. The technical one will try to use security cameras to track me. The woman will blend with others in her barracks. The angry one, Morrison, he'll try to think like his grandfather. Maybe, Helen said, or maybe they'll surprise us both. Children don't surprise me anymore. These aren't children. They're Marines who faced death last night and showed up to train this morning. That makes them extraordinary. For the next 30 minutes, Helen and Dmitri stood in comfortable silence, while the generals and gathered Marines watched nervously. This wasn't what anyone had expected from the first day of the Ghost Protocol Academy. At exactly 0800, Dmitri began to move. He didn't run or hurry. He simply walked to where Derek had disappeared and knelt, examining the ground. His fingers traced patterns only he could see. Technical specialist tried to double back 3 times to confuse his trail. Smart, but he steps heavier on his right foot when he's thinking. Makes the pattern distinctive. He followed Derek's trail with uncanny precision, moving through the administrative building like he'd lived there for years. Within 40 minutes, he found Derek hidden in a server room, tucked behind equipment. First catch, Dmitri announced over the radio Helen had given him. 6 to go. Derek emerged, frustrated but curious. How? You think too much, Dmitri told him. Thinking leaves patterns. Next time, trust instinct. The next 2 hours were a masterclass in tracking. Dmitri found 4 more Marines with methodical efficiency. Each time he explained exactly how. A disturbed spiderweb here, a partial footprint there, the way dust had been displaced on a windowsill. But 2 remained hidden, Jake and Maria. Interesting, Dmitri admitted as the 3rd hour approached. The bullies are proving most capable. Former bullies, Helen corrected. People can change. Not in one night. No, but they can choose to change in one moment. The rest is just follow-through. With 10 minutes remaining, Dmitri stood in the center of the base, eyes closed, listening. Then he smiled. The woman is in the mess hall, hiding where this all began. Poetic, but predictable. He found Maria in the walk-in freezer where Helen had hidden them the night before. She emerged shivering, but proud to have lasted so long. 5 minutes left, Helen announced. 1 Marine still hidden. Dmitri's expression grew serious. This was professional pride now. He moved with renewed purpose, checking every place a person could hide. 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute. The alarm sounded. Jake Morrison had evaded the greatest tracker in Russian history. "Impossible," Dmitri muttered. Then louder, "Show yourself, Morrison." Jake emerged from the last place anyone would look. He'd been standing in plain sight among the Marines watching the exercise, having grabbed a different uniform and blended with the crowd. He'd been there for 2 hours, hiding in plain view. His grandfather's trick, Helen said quietly. Tim always said the best hiding place was where everyone could see you, but no one would look. Dmitri stared at Jake with something approaching respect. "You didn't run. You didn't hide. You became background. Instructor Carter taught us this morning. We're always being watched. So, I figured why fight it? Just become someone not worth watching." Dmitri turned to Helen. "One evaded me. By our agreement, I walk away. Or you stay and teach," Helen offered. "Hydra will never pay you what you're worth. But here, you could matter. Here, you could create legends instead of hunting them. I've killed 67 people in my career. And I've killed 73. Our students don't need to repeat our numbers. They need to learn our skills to prevent those numbers." Dmitri was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out a satellite phone and dialed a number. He spoke rapid Russian, then switched to English for Helen's benefit. "This is Volkov. Contract terminated. Phantom 6 is dead. Has been for 15 years. Some janitor is playing soldier with children. Not worth my time." He hung up and tossed the phone into a nearby trash can. "I assume instructor positions come with room and board?" Helen smiled. "Welcome to Ghost Protocol Academy, Instructor Volkov." The gathered Marines erupted in surprise and confusion. General Anderson stepped forward. "We can't just hire a Russian operative." "Former Russian operative," Dmitri corrected. "I defected the moment I threw that phone away. Besides, you need me. How many of your instructors have successfully tracked targets through Siberian winters and Chechen mountains?" "This is highly irregular," General Thompson protested. "So is a janitor who's really a special operations legend," Helen pointed out. "The academy isn't about regular, it's about effective." Over the next week, word spread throughout the military community. Ghost Protocol Academy was real, and it was unlike anything that had existed before. No high-tech facilities, no elaborate equipment, just 2 aging warriors teaching young Marines to navigate darkness, both literal and metaphorical. The first official class started with 28 volunteers from all service branches. Helen's original 7 became squad leaders, having learned more in one night of terror than most learned in years of training. Jake Morrison proved especially adept. His natural athleticism combined with his grandfather's genetic gifts for night vision, making him exceptional in darkness operations. But more importantly, his transformation from bully to protector became the model for others. He spent extra hours training newer students, especially those who reminded him of who he used to be. Maria Santos discovered she had an uncanny ability for sound recognition, able to identify individuals by breathing patterns and heartbeats from remarkable distances. She developed a training module called Acoustic Signature Recognition that would become standard in special operations training worldwide. Derek Chen created a hybrid approach, combining traditional tracking with modern technology in ways that enhanced rather than replaced human skills. His innovations would eventually revolutionize surveillance countermeasures, but it was Helen herself who proved most transformative. Her teaching method was unorthodox. Instead of breaking students down, she built them up from their failures. Every mistake became a lesson, every weakness a potential strength. "You don't create warriors by destroying people," she told General Anderson during one of his observation visits. "You create them by showing them they're capable of more than they imagined." 3 weeks into the academy's operation, an unexpected visitor arrived. Anna Volkov, now Anna Patterson, drove onto base with her 17-year-old daughter Helena. The girl was tall, athletic, with her mother's sharp features and determined eyes. "Is it true?" Anna asked Helen directly. "Uncle Dmitri is teaching here?" "He is," Helen confirmed. "Does that bother you?" "He hunted you for 30 years. You saved my life. The irony is substantial." Young Helena stepped forward. "I want to apply for the academy." Helen studied her carefully. "You're too young. Minimum age is 18. "You were 17 when you joined the military," Helena countered. Lied about your age to get in early. How do you know that? Mom kept newspaper clippings. Every mention of Phantom 6, every rumor, every speculation. I've been studying you my entire life. Studying and doing are different things. Then let me do. Helen looked at Anna, who nodded. She's been training since she could walk. Dmitri may have hunted you, but he also taught his niece's daughter everything he knew about survival. Not everything, Dmitri said, appearing from nowhere, as was his habit, but enough to make her interesting. The reunion between Dmitri and Anna was touching in its simplicity. The old tracker hugged his great niece with genuine affection, then turned to Helena with professional assessment. Show me what you remember, he said. For the next hour, Helena demonstrated skills that put some of the Marine students to shame. Tracking, evasion, acoustic targeting, even basic pressure point techniques. When she finished, both Helena and Dmitri were impressed. 3 months, Helens decided. You train with the Marines for 3 months. If you keep up, you can enter the academy on your 18th birthday. Helena's face lit up. I won't disappoint you. It's not about disappointing me. It's about honoring those who came before. Your mother survived hell. Make sure her sacrifice means something. As the weeks turned into months, the Ghost Protocol Academy evolved from an experiment into an institution. The Pentagon quietly funded expansions, though Helen insisted on maintaining the minimalist approach. No fancy buildings or high-tech simulators, just practical training in real-world conditions. The accident happened during week 12. A night training exercise went wrong when a sudden storm hit Camp Pendleton. 0 visibility, 60-knot winds, horizontal rain. 2 students, Roberts and Kim, were separated from their unit in the mountains east of base. Radio communications were down. Standard search and rescue couldn't operate in the conditions. Helen suited up without hesitation. At 58, she shouldn't have been able to do what came next. But muscle memory doesn't age the same way muscles do. She disappeared into the storm with only basic gear and an old-fashioned compass. Jake insisted on going with her. You trained us for this, he argued. Let us help. This isn't training, Morrison. This is real. That's why you need backup. My grandfather wouldn't let you go alone. Helen studied him for a moment, then nodded. Gear up. We leave in 2 minutes. They went into the storm together, teacher and student, legend and legacy. The wind was so strong it could knock a person off their feet. The rain so heavy it was like walking through a waterfall. But Helen moved through it like she was born to it, and Jake followed, trusting her completely. They found Roberts first, hypothermic and disoriented, sheltering in a shallow cave. Helen immediately began medical treatment, while Jake went after Kim, using the search pattern Helen had taught him. He found her 20 minutes later, injured but alive, her ankle broken from a fall. The journey back took 4 hours. 4 hours of carrying injured Marines through a storm that would have killed most people, but Helen and Jake brought them home alive. Colonel Richards met them at the base medical center. That was insane. Heroic, but insane. Helen was exhausted, but unbowed. It was necessary. We don't leave people behind. You could have died out there, but we didn't. And now every student at the academy knows that we practice what we preach. That changes everything. She was right. After that night, the academy's reputation solidified. These weren't just instructors teaching theory. They were practitioners who would risk everything for their students. 6 months into the academy's operation, the real test came. A Hydra cell attempted to infiltrate Camp Pendleton, targeting the academy specifically. 12 operatives, highly trained, using the cover of a congressional inspection visit. They didn't expect the janitors, groundskeepers, and food service workers to be academy graduates placed specifically to watch for such infiltration. The attack came at 0300 hours. Or it would have, if Helen hadn't already positioned her students. The Hydra operatives walked into a trap they couldn't see coming. Every shadow held a ghost. Every corner concealed a protector. The takedown was swift, silent, and complete. No shots fired, no alarms raised. 12 Hydra operatives captured without a single casualty on either side. How? The Hydra leader demanded as he was processed. We had perfect intelligence. We knew your patterns, your weaknesses. Helen smiled coldly. You had intelligence on Phantom 6, but I'm not her anymore. I'm something better. I'm a teacher, and I've taught 318 students so far. Each one is now a ghost. Each one is watching. Good luck finding them all. The Hydra network began to collapse after that. Not through military action, but through paranoia. They couldn't trust anyone, couldn't predict where the next ghost might be hiding. The janitor might be an academy graduate, the secretary, the mechanic, the cook. Anyone could be a ghost. General Anderson visited the academy on its first anniversary. The 28 original students had become 200. The program had expanded to 3 other bases, all following Helen's minimalist model. "You've revolutionized special operations training," he told Helen. "The president wants to award you the Medal of Freedom." "I already have all the medals I need," Helen replied. "Give it to Jake Morrison. He's the future of the program." "Morrison? The Marine who shoved you? The Marine who learned from his mistakes? The Marine who went into a storm to save others? The Marine who is becoming the instructor his grandfather would be proud of?" Jake had indeed flourished. His natural leadership, tempered by humility learned through failure, made him an ideal instructor candidate. He was scheduled to take over the East Coast Academy when it opened. Maria Santos had been recruited by Naval Intelligence, her acoustic skills invaluable for submarine detection and underwater surveillance. But she returned to teach monthly workshops, never forgetting where her transformation began. Derek Chen had developed an entirely new field of study, integrated tactical analysis, combining human intuition with technological capability. The NSA had tried to recruit him repeatedly, but he chose to stay at the academy. Dmitry Volkov had become something no one expected, beloved. His gruff exterior hid a genuine care for his students. His tracking classes were legendary, but it was his life lessons that students remembered most. "Every choice leaves a trail," he would say. "Make sure yours leads somewhere worth going." Young Helena Patterson had not only met expectations, but exceeded them. On her 18th birthday, she formally entered the academy and completed the course in record time. She would eventually become the youngest instructor in academy history, specializing in what she called inherited instinct, teaching students to recognize and develop genetic predispositions for certain skills. The second anniversary of the academy brought an unexpected guest. The president himself arrived, not with fanfare but quietly, wanting to observe without disrupting training. He watched Helen lead a night navigation exercise, 70-year-old Dmitry demonstrate tracking techniques, and Jake Morrison teach close-quarters combat with a patience his younger self could never have managed. "This is not what I expected," the president admitted to Helen. "I thought it would be more military." "It is military," Helen replied, "just not the kind you're used to. We're not creating super soldiers. We're creating superhumans. People who can fight if needed, but choose protection over aggression, wisdom over violence." And it works? In 2 years, Academy graduates have prevented 17 terrorist attacks, rescued 43 kidnap victims, and identified over 100 embedded foreign assets, all without firing a single shot or making a single headline. "Ghosts indeed," the president murmured. "What do you need from me?" "Nothing. The less official attention we receive, the more effective we become. Ghosts work best when no one believes they exist." That evening, Helen stood in the mess hall where it all began. It had been renovated after the Kozlov incident, but she'd insisted on keeping one thing. The spot where Jake had shoved her was marked with a small plaque that read, "Every transformation begins with a choice." Jake found her there, holding 2 cups of coffee. Colombian, single origin, just how you like it. They stood in comfortable silence, teacher and student, past and future. "Do you ever regret it?" Jake asked. "Coming out of hiding? I regret that it took me 15 years to realize hiding wasn't living. Your grandfather tried to tell me in his letters, but I wasn't ready to hear it." "He wrote to you?" "Every month for 15 years. I never replied, but he kept writing, telling me about you, about your sister, about the world moving forward. He knew I was alive. He was the only one who never doubted." Jake pulled out a worn envelope. "He left this for you. Mom gave it to me after she heard about the academy. She said Grandpa made her promise to deliver it if you ever surfaced." Helen opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a photo, Tim Morrison's team from Bosnia, with Helen at the center, and a simple note. "You were never just a ghost. You were our light in the darkness. Time to shine again. Tim." "He loved you," Jake said simply, not romantically, but as a warrior loves their commander, with absolute trust and respect. "I loved him too," Helen admitted, "all of them. That's why losing them broke something in me that took 15 years to heal." "But you did heal." "No, I learned to function despite the break. There's a difference. But teaching, building this academy, watching you all transform, that's been better than healing. It's been purpose. A knock at the door interrupted them. Maria Santos entered with Derek Chen and the other original 7, now all instructors or instructor candidates. "Ma'am," Maria said formally, then broke into a grin. "We wanted to thank you. 2 years ago, we were bullies who shoved an old woman. Today, we're protectors. That transformation is because of you." Helen shook her head. "The transformation was your choice. I just provided the opportunity." "Still," Derek added, holding up a small box, "we got you something." Inside was a new challenge coin. One side showed the Ghost Protocol Academy insignia, a shadow protecting a flame. The other side had 7 names, the original students, surrounding a simple inscription: "From darkness, light." Helen held the coin tightly, emotion threatening to overwhelm her usual control. "Thank you." "There's more," Jake said. "The Pentagon approved your teaching methodology for all special operations training. The Ghost Protocol is now standard across all branches. And," Maria added, "they're creating a permanent position, Director of Asymmetric Warfare Training. It's yours if you want it." Helen looked at each of them, these Marines who had begun as her tormentors and became her legacy. "I'm a janitor who teaches on the side. I don't need titles." "But we need you," Jake said. "The military needs you. The country needs you." Helen was about to respond when Dmitri burst in, moving faster than she'd seen him move in months. "We have a problem. A big problem." He handed her a satellite phone. On the other end was a voice she hadn't heard in 30 years. "Hello, Phantom 6, the voice said in accented English. "Or should I say, Instructor Carter?" Helen's blood ran cold. "Nikolai, you're supposed to be dead. As are you. But here we are, 2 ghosts still haunting the world. I have something you want. 43 children, ages 7 to 12. Familiar ages, yes? You have 72 hours to come alone, or history repeats itself." The line went dead. Helen stood frozen for a moment, then began moving with purpose. "Morrison, contact the Pentagon. Tell them Ghost Protocol is going active. Santos, I need satellite imagery of everything within 500 miles of the coordinates I'm about to give you. Chen, hack into every database you can and find out how Nikolai Volkov survived." "Volkov?" Dimitri's face was pale. "My brother is alive?" "Apparently so," Helen said grimly, "and he's recreating Bosnia to draw me out." "You can't go alone," Jake protested. "That's what he expects." "No," Helen smiled coldly. "He expects Phantom 6 to come alone, but I'm not Phantom 6 anymore. I'm Instructor Carter, and instructors never go anywhere without their students." She looked at the original 7, now trained, capable, and ready. "Lessons are over. Time for the final exam." "What's the exam?" Maria asked, though she already knew the answer. "We're going to save 43 children, capture or eliminate an international trafficking ring, and prove that ghosts don't work alone anymore. We work as a team." Jake stepped forward. "All of us?" "All of us, plus 70 more graduates I'm calling in. Nikolai expects 1 ghost. He's getting 100. Dimitri's hands were clenched into fists. "My brother, I thought he died in Chechnya. So did everyone. But he's been building a new network, learning from Hydra's mistakes. This is his coming out party, using children as bait to draw out the one person who stopped him before. Then we stop him again," Jake said firmly. Helen looked at each of them. "This won't be training. This will be real combat. Some of you might not come home." "With respect, ma'am," Maria said, "we didn't come home 2 years ago either. We came home different, better, because of you. Now it's our turn to pay that forward." Over the next 24 hours, Camp Pendleton became a staging ground for the largest gathering of Ghost Protocol graduates in the Academy's short history. They came from every base, every branch, dropping everything to answer the call. Helena Patterson arrived with her mother Anna, both insisting on joining the operation. "Those children could be me," Anna said simply. "I can't sit this out." The Pentagon initially resisted, wanting to send conventional forces, but Helen stood firm. "Conventional forces will get those children killed. This requires ghosts, people who can operate in darkness without technology, without support, without making a sound." General Anderson finally agreed. "What do you need?" "Transport to these coordinates." Helen showed him a map. "Then nothing. No oversight, no interference, no extraction plan. We go in as ghosts, we come out as ghosts, or we don't come out at all. 48 hours later, 102 Academy graduates stood in a warehouse 5 miles from Nikolai's compound. Helen had spent the day planning, using every skill from 40 years of experience. He has 60 operatives, she explained, all former special forces from various countries. The children are held in 3 separate buildings to prevent a single rescue. He expects me to come through the main gate, probably with a small team. So, we don't use the gate, Jake suggested. We don't use any traditional approach, Helen confirmed. We become the night itself. The operation began at 0200 hours. No night vision, no radios, no technology that could be detected or jammed. Just humans trained to navigate darkness using tune, smell, and instinct. Jake led Alpha Team, 20 graduates including Maria and Derek, toward the first building. They moved like liquid shadow, using techniques Helen had drilled into them for 2 years. Dmitri led Bravo Team to the second building, his tracking skills reversed to become infiltration expertise. His team included Helena Patterson, whose youth was balanced by exceptional training. Helen led Charlie Team to the third building and the main compound where Nikolai waited. With her were the most experienced graduates, those who had mastered not just physical skills, but the mental discipline to face a legend. The guards never heard them coming. Academy training emphasized non-lethal takedowns whenever possible, and the graduates executed them perfectly. Pressure points, blood chokes, nerve strikes. Guards dropped unconscious without understanding what had happened. Jake's team found 15 children in the first building, terrified but unharmed. They began evacuation procedures. Each graduate assigned specific children to guide through the darkness. Dimitri's team discovered 14 children in the second building, but also a surprise. 3 of Nikolai's men were actually undercover Interpol agents who'd infiltrated the organization. They immediately switched sides when they realized what was happening. "Ghost Protocol?" one whispered in amazement. "We thought you were a myth." "We are," Dmitri replied. "You never saw us." Helen's team encountered the heaviest resistance. Nikolai had positioned his best operatives around the main compound, but Helen had taught her students well. They used the darkness like a weapon, creating confusion, misdirection, fear. She found Nikolai in the command center, watching monitors that showed nothing but darkness and unconscious guards. He was older, scarred, but still dangerous. "Hello, brother," Dmitri said from behind him. Nikolai spun, shocked. "Dmitri, you're with her?" "I'm with them." Dmitri gestured to the shadows, where graduates stood ready. "The world changed while you were hiding, Nikolai. Lone wolves are extinct. Only packs survive now." "Poetic," Nikolai sneered. "But I still have 14 children in the basement, wired with explosives. Your ghosts make one wrong move, and nothing," Helen interrupted. "We found them 20 minutes ago. Delta Team, trained specifically in EOD, disarmed your devices while you were watching empty monitors." Nikolai's face showed the exact moment he understood. He wasn't facing Phantom 6. He was facing an entire academy of ghosts. "Impossible. I planned for everything." "You planned for the past," Helen said. "But we're the future. Morrison, show him." Jake stepped from the shadows with the 14 children from the basement, each safely escorted by a graduate. All 43 children were accounted for, safe, and being evacuated to medical facilities. Nikolai reached for his weapon, but Helen was faster, not with violence, but with words. 47 of your men are unconscious but alive. 3 were undercover agents. That leaves 10 unaccounted for." She paused. "They surrendered to Santos's team 15 minutes ago when they realized they were surrounded by shadows they couldn't fight." "You're lying." Maria's voice came from Nikolai's own radio. "Actually, she's not. Your men are quite talkative once they realized we weren't here to kill them, just to stop them." Nikolai looked at his brother. "You betrayed your blood for this American." "I chose to teach instead of destroy," Dmitri replied. "I chose to build instead of break. I chose family over blood." The takedown was anticlimactic. Nikolai simply gave up, understanding he'd been outmaneuvered not by superior force, but by superior strategy. By an enemy he couldn't see, couldn't predict, couldn't fight. As local authorities arrived to process the prisoners and care for the children, Helen stood with her students, her family, watching the sunrise. "That was too easy," Jake said suspiciously. "Easy?" Helen laughed. We just coordinated 102 operators in complete darkness with no technology against 60 hostiles holding 43 hostages. That wasn't easy. It was impossible. But you did it anyway. We did it, Maria corrected. All of us, including you. Especially you, Derek added. You taught us that darkness isn't something to fear, but something to understand. Helena Patterson approached with her mother Anna. The children are asking about the shadows that saved them. What should we tell them? Helen thought for a moment. Tell them that guardian angels don't always have wings. Sometimes they're just people who learn to walk in darkness so others can stay in the light. Anna hugged Helen tightly. Thank you, again, for everything. As they prepared to leave, Dmitri approached his brother one last time. Nikolai was in custody, facing life in prison. Why? Dmitri asked. We were soldiers, heroes. How did you become this? Nikolai's answer was simple and terrible. I never stopped being a soldier. I just chose the wrong war. Dmitri turned away, but Helen stopped him. He made his choice. You made yours. Don't carry his darkness. Wise words from someone who carried darkness for 15 years. Which is how I know it's not worth it. Next week's story features a nurse who was fired unfairly, only to have a Black Hawk helicopter land on the hospital roof, with admirals seeking her specifically. You won't want to miss what happens when hidden valor is finally revealed. The flight back to Camp Pendleton was quiet. Each graduate processed what they'd just accomplished. No casualties, no fatalities, 43 children saved. It was the kind of operation that would never make headlines, but would ripple through the intelligence community for years. General Anderson met them at the airfield. Outstanding work, all of you. Just doing what we were trained to do, Jake replied. No, Anderson corrected. You did something that's never been done before. A completely dark operation with over 100 operators and perfect coordination. You've proven that the Ghost Protocol works on a scale we never imagined. Helen stepped forward, then expanded. Every base, every branch. Not to create an elite unit, but to ensure that every service member can operate when the lights go out. That would require thousands of instructors. Helen gestured to her graduates. You're looking at them. Each one can teach what they've learned. Exponential growth. Within 5 years, you could have 100,000 ghosts. 100,000? Anderson looked skeptical. Why not? Every Marine, soldier, sailor, and airman who can navigate darkness. Every support staff member who can recognize threats. Every person on every base capable of protecting themselves and others when technology fails. That would fundamentally change military doctrine. Good, Helen said firmly. Doctrine needs changing. We're preparing for the last war while our enemies prepare for the next one. The Ghost Protocol prepares for all wars. The ones fought with million-dollar missiles and the ones fought with bare hands in pitch darkness. Over the following months, Helen's vision began to materialize. The success of the Nikolai operation had proven that Ghost Protocol wasn't just about individual excellence, but collective capability. Jake Morrison took over as lead instructor when Helen stepped back to an advisory role. He brought his grandfather's wisdom, combined with modern understanding, creating a training program that was both timeless and cutting edge. My grandfather once told me, Jake said during his first address to new students, that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and acting anyway. In the darkness, we're all afraid. But together, we act. Maria Santos developed the acoustic training program into a full curriculum, teaching students to use sound as both weapon and shield. Her techniques would eventually be adopted by NASA for astronaut training and sensory isolation. Derek Chen created an integration protocol that allowed Ghost Protocol training to complement rather than replace technological advancement. We don't reject technology, he explained. We transcend dependence on it. Helena Patterson, at 20, became the youngest senior instructor, specializing in training teenage dependents of military families. Security starts at home, she argued. If our families can recognize and respond to threats, our bases become impenetrable. Dmitri Volkov, now 75, continued teaching despite his age. His classes were legendary, filled with hard-won wisdom and dark humor. He'd found redemption in teaching, transforming from hunter to protector. On the 3rd anniversary of the Academy, Helen received an unexpected visitor. Viktor Kozlov, the operative who'd started it all, had been released from prison as part of a cooperation agreement. He stood at the Academy gates, not as a threat, but as a petitioner. I've spent 3 years thinking about that night, he told Helen, about how one old woman defeated 3 trained operators. I want to learn. Learn what? How to be more than a weapon. How to be what you've become, someone who builds instead of breaks. Helen studied him for a long moment. Redemption isn't guaranteed. You'd start at the bottom, with 18-year-old recruits. Your experience means nothing here. Only your willingness to change matters. I accept. And so Viktor Kozlov became the Academy's most unlikely student, training alongside recruits young enough to be his grandchildren. His transformation would become legend, the enemy who became an ally, the hunter who became a protector. 6 months later, Helen stood before Congress, testifying about the Ghost Protocol's effectiveness. She wore her janitor's uniform, not military dress. "Why that outfit?" a senator asked. "Because this is who I really am," Helen replied. "Not Phantom Six, not Lieutenant Colonel Morrison. I'm Helen Carter, janitor. And if a janitor can teach Marines to navigate darkness, imagine what else we're capable of when we stop judging by appearances. You're asking us to fund a massive expansion of your program. I'm asking you to invest in resilience. Every dollar spent on Ghost Protocol training saves 10 in equipment that won't be needed when the power goes out. Every graduate is a force multiplier who can operate with nothing but training and instinct." "And if we say no?" Helen smiled. "Then I go back to cleaning mess halls. But the 7 Marines who shoved me 3 years ago will continue teaching others. And those others will teach more. The ghost is out of the bottle, Senator. The only question is whether you want to guide its growth or watch it happen without you." The funding was approved unanimously. As Helen walked out of the Capitol, Jake was waiting for her. "How did it go?" "They think they're funding a training program. They don't realize they're funding a revolution in how we think about warfare." "Warfare? The war against darkness, Morrison. Not literal darkness, but the darkness of ignorance, cruelty, and fear. Every graduate who chooses protection over aggression, every operative who captures instead of kills, every shadow that guards instead of threatens, that's the real victory." They walked together toward the waiting vehicle, teacher and student, past and future, 2 ghosts visible in the daylight. "Your grandfather would be proud," Helen said suddenly. "Of me? Of us. Of what we've built from the ashes of who we were." As they drove away from the Capitol building, its white dome gleaming in the afternoon sun, Helen Carter pressed her weathered hand against the window and looked back at the symbol of American democracy. The irony wasn't lost on her. 3 years ago, she had been utterly invisible, just another nameless janitor pushing a mop through empty hallways while senators and generals walked past without a second glance. She had been a ghost in the truest sense, haunting the margins of military life, cleaning up the physical messes while carrying the weight of memories that could never be scrubbed clean. Now, through a twist of fate that began with cruelty and transformed into redemption, she had created an army of shadows that would protect the nation for generations to come. Not an army in the traditional sense, no battalions or brigades, no formal command structure that could be targeted or dismantled. Instead, she had built something far more resilient, a network of protectors who could operate in the spaces between light and dark, individuals who understood that true strength came not from weapons or technology, but from the ability to navigate uncertainty with wisdom and compassion. But deep in her heart, beneath the medals she never wore and the rank she had abandoned, Helen knew she was still fundamentally a janitor. The realization brought her peace rather than shame. She was someone who cleaned up messes, who worked in the darkness so others could live in the light. The only difference between then and now was the size of the mess and the number of people helping her clean it. Where once she had mopped floors alone at 2 in the morning, now she had hundreds of graduates across 17 bases, each one committed to the same principle: service without recognition, protection without glory. The Ghost Protocol Academy had grown beyond her wildest expectations. 17 bases across the country, from the frozen training grounds of Alaska to the humid swamps of Louisiana, each one following the minimalist philosophy she had established. No fancy equipment or high-tech simulators, just practical training in real-world conditions. The graduates, her ghosts, had already prevented countless threats that the public would never know about. 17 terrorist attacks stopped before they could begin. 43 kidnap victims rescued without a single news headline. Over 100 embedded foreign assets identified and neutralized without firing a shot. They had redefined what it meant to be a warrior in the 21st century, not through superior firepower, but through superior understanding. Yet despite all of this, despite the Pentagon's recognition and the president's personal endorsement, Helen Carter still cleaned the mess hall at Camp Pendleton 3 nights a week, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, from 10 at night until 2 in the morning. Not because she had to. The generals had offered her a full staff, a comfortable retirement, anything she wanted. She did it because she chose to. Because every stroke of that mop across the linoleum floor was a meditation, a reminder of where she came from and why she continued. Because every time she pushed that industrial bucket with its squeaky wheel down the empty corridors, she remembered the fundamental truth she tried to instill in every student. Transformation begins with humility, continues with perseverance, and never truly ends. The mop wasn't just a cleaning tool, it was a teacher, a constant reminder that the most important work often happens when no one is watching, that dignity exists in every job, and that sometimes the most powerful position is the one that appears powerless. And sometimes, late at night, when the base was quiet, except for the distant sound of helicopters and the occasional bark of orders from the training grounds, new Marines would come into the mess hall. Young men and women, fresh from boot camp, still drunk on their own perceived importance, still believing that strength meant dominance and respect had to be taken rather than earned. They would see her, an older woman in a faded janitor's uniform, moving slowly with her mop and bucket, and they would act tough, dismissive, sometimes even cruel. When this happened, Helen would simply smile, that small, knowing smile that had become her trademark. Not a smile of superiority or secret knowledge, but one of patient understanding. Because she knew that one day, perhaps sooner than they expected, these same Marines might learn the truth that had taken her decades to understand, that the most powerful person in any room is often the one nobody notices, the secretary who knows every secret, the mechanic who keeps everything running, the cook who notices when someone hasn't eaten, the janitor who sees everything but says nothing. They might learn, as Jake Morrison had learned through pain and humility, that true strength isn't about being seen, but about seeing others. That real power comes not from commanding attention, but from paying attention. That the greatest warriors are often those who choose not to fight, who de-escalate rather than dominate, who protect rather than punish. She had become living proof that anyone could be more than they appeared. She was the one who walked in shadows to protect the light, understanding that darkness wasn't the absence of light, but simply another way of seeing. The ghost who was never really gone, just waiting in the quiet spaces between breaths, in the pause between heartbeats, in the moment before dawn when the world holds its breath and anything seems possible. She was waiting for the right moment to teach others to become more than they ever imagined possible. And that moment came 3 times a week, every week, in a mess hall that smelled of industrial disinfectant and old coffee, where transformation could begin with something as simple as treating a janitor with respect. In the end, Helen Carter's greatest victory wasn't defeating Viktor Kozlov or saving those 43 children, though both had been necessary. It wasn't even establishing the Ghost Protocol Academy, though that would be her most visible legacy. Her greatest victory was proving a simple, revolutionary truth, that anyone, a janitor, a bully, a broken soldier, a frightened child, could become a guardian. All it took was someone willing to teach them to navigate the darkness, both outside and within. Someone patient enough to show them that their failures weren't endings but beginnings, that their weaknesses could become strengths, that their darkness could become their light. And in that darkness, in those quiet hours between midnight and dawn, when she pushed her mop across the floors where she had once been shoved and humiliated, where she had revealed herself and changed lives, they all found their light. Not a blinding spotlight that announced their presence to the world, but a steady flame that could guide others home, a light that cast shadows where other guardians could hide, a light that proved that even in the deepest darkness, hope could survive, thrive, and multiply. The ghost was never really gone. She was just waiting, mop in hand, for the next transformation to begin.
The stories end here, but the journey continues. Many new episodes are waiting for you. And if you enjoy, please take a moment to like, subscribe to REV Story.